Welcome to Mastering Your World Through Frequencies. In this episode, there's an introduction, an interview, and most importantly, at the end, a group frequency calibration where the frequency work happens and change is catalyzed. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, this is Cheong. I'm here with my co-host Tia. I've been hearing a lot from parents who are concerned about their kids. They're noticing that their kids are checking out, are numb, don't want to be or are afraid of being with others, are having dark or suicidal thoughts, are depressed, are addicted to their devices, reclusive, and don't feel like they want to participate in life or in this world. So this episode is to address some of these issues so you can understand what's happening. And most importantly, the group frequency calibration, or GFC, at the end is where the frequency work happens and where change actually occurs. It will help them to start to feel more grounded, safe, and at ease in their bodies and in life. If your kid or kids are into frequency work and want to actively listen, that's great. If they're not, you can play it in the background, barely audible, and they'll still benefit. And if you listen to it along with them, that's excellent too. So let's get started.
So Karen, this is an interesting title. I'm wondering what made you want to talk about kids these days and what is up with them?
Yeah. That's a good question. Good place to start. Yeah. So the reason we're addressing this is because we've been getting a lot of emails from parents, or when I speak to people on sessions, etc., that are concerned about their kids. And there's a number of things going on with kids right now that I feel need to be addressed. And I also, the main part of this whole podcast is really the GFC at the end, right? That's really the most important part that we've discussed before, and I wanted to have something for kids so they could play and feel better by listening to it. So what's going on with kids? So the first is that parents are writing in saying that their kids are becoming very addicted to their devices. It's really hard to get them off the devices, especially when the pandemic hit and they were forced to go onto online schooling. Especially younger kids, it became really hard for them, and they started to become much more addicted to their digital media because it was also the platform on which they learned. Okay, so digital media addiction is a huge deal right now for parents. I'm hearing from more parents like concerns that their children are having like suicidal thoughts or dark thoughts. They are numbing out. They don't feel like they belong here, or they don't like what they want to know what their purpose is. They don't feel like a joyfulness in their life. They are like checking out or getting depressed. So that's happening a lot.
ADD.
Yeah, ADD is
if
happening
you want to
like
label it.
that. Yeah. So there's a lot of like stuff happening with kids right now in a time that's already unstable. So imagine if you're an adult and this is an unstable time. Your kids are actually feeling all of it, and they're feeling you. So they're feeling a lot. There's a lot going on for kids right now. A lot of them are very sensitive. In particular, if your children or your child, depending on what you have, is sensitive or is what I call a new consciousness kid. They're having a really hard time right now, especially if the parents aren't understanding what's happening. You see what I'm saying? Because new consciousness kids are kids that are usually, I've only met one that's 17. Usually it's like 15 or less, 17 or less in age, okay typically. They are children who look like regular kids, but they're really beings of a higher level order, meaning they're coming from higher resonating consciousness planes. And because consciousness is high enough, they can actually come into the density now and embody to help humanity, okay? In however they are going to express that, okay? So it doesn't mean they're going to necessarily be healers or whatever. It just means that the resonance they are is much higher. So their being embodied at this time buoys the resonance of the collective.
That in itself helps.
It helps
they
tremendously.
They don't have to do something specific.
No,
They're just
they don't,
being them.
Exactly. They don't need to save anything. They don't need to do anything particular. Just their resonance existing in embodiment helps the collective.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's what I call a new consciousness kid. And you'll notice them. Typically, if you're the parent of one, you'll know, because they seem wiser. They have, they're sensitive in ways that isn't like typical of a child. They'll, some of them have abilities. They can do certain things. that's not required at all, but or they can sense other things around them or that type of thing, right? Or they'll just seem a lot wiser than they should be for that child. You're like, whoa, why is this kid having this conversation? I mean, they're like, 8 or whatever it is, but they're holding their own in a conversation. Maybe not in the same vocabulary that you are, but they pace with you in terms of certain concepts or things that they are aware of.
Yeah, and you can see it especially in relation to other kids their age. Again, it's not a better than thing. It's just like, whoa. You're on a different level.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And so those kids, when they have parents who aren't as aware, it's harder for them because they don't have context for what's happening. Also, kids who have like a very hard time being aware of their identity or their bodies, having a really hard time right now because they're aware of the collective. And a lot of times, because they don't have a strong sense of who they are or their boundary of their spirit body, they'll often feel like things are pushing into them, like they're getting pushed out of their bodies a lot. So they'll try to escape into something. Some of them will escape into music, some of them will escape into art, some of them will escape online, which is not great. Some of them, unfortunately, as they get older, will escape into drugs because it doesn't feel good to them. It doesn't feel at all good. And so they're trying to like manage it and no one's telling them really what's happening. They're like a problem child, right? And they kind of get moved around a lot because they can't seem to deal very well with other people or, it's not that they're angry. They're just like, they somehow just don't mesh as well with other folks. And so parents start moving them around. They don't know what's wrong. A lot of times what's happening for these children is they're not in their bodies. They don't know how to hold their space, and they're not in time. As soon as you bring a child like that back into their body and start anchoring them there, they start to flourish. They just don't know how to get there on their own. Like most people don't,
Right.
So it can be very scary for them.
Now, okay, I know you have some personal examples of how you maybe have helped some kids.
Yeah, totally. So I worked with this young man, actually. I think he was probably just turned, he was 14 turning 15. And his aunt actually is a client of mine. And he was feeling depressed, disassociated. He actually had, he was doing some kind of something and he fell off a railing and hit his head because he kind of had left his body. Like he was disassociating from his body.
That's another thing too, just a side note, like a lot of falls. Or
a lot of falls. Yeah, or like smashing into stuff.
Yeah,
because you're not aware of your body.
You're not aware, okay.
Yeah, so you'll like smack into things and stuff.
Yeah.
So he fell and he hit his head, which made it worse because he didn't want to associate with his body because it was painful. So it just exacerbated it. And then he was getting depressed and he couldn't be around people. And so with this particular young man, I think I saw him, we worked together maybe somewhere, I don't remember actually, it's somewhere between 6 and 8 times or something like this. He really was not in his body and he was really out of time. And so as a result, he was very depressed, withdrawn. He was getting more negative, starting to have dark thoughts like, why am I here? I don't want to be with anybody. Like, I don't see the point. All that kind of languaging, which for a parent is very, very alarming, right? And so like he just became uninterested in the things he used to find pleasurable. He just like checked out,
Yeah.
Okay, so with this young man, I worked with him over a period of about 1.5 years. And we did different things, like bringing him back into his body, back into time, like reducing his sensitivity to the collective, right? Because he feels a lot of the collective. So I was like, okay, you really can't, you have to stop feeling them so much because it's throwing you off and it pushes him into a time distortion, right? And it just causes all this feeling not great. So we worked on strengthening him, strengthening his boundaries, making his spirit body stronger, all that sort of stuff. And what was really cool is that his aunt just sent us this video of their graduating class. Like he's a sophomore, I think, and they at the end for the graduation, as a class, like sang the song that they shared online. And there were some kids who did a solo, and this kid was one of the kids who did the solo. And when he sang, it was just like he was standing on a hilltop, and he had the really inspired idea to do like a drone shot, right? So it was like so super epic. He's like standing on this hill, and the drone's like going like that, right? So it's like amazing, right? Spectacular. But what was even more spectacular than the scenery was his heart field. It was huge, right? And I actually started to, I'm getting a little emotional now, but like just like, whoo, huge heart field. And I thought, man, this kid has come, like he's flourishing now. You know, he's so thriving, like he's not afraid to be the magnificence of who he is, like the authenticity. And is he gonna stumble and be a kid? Of course, but he's like not afraid to just like be in his heart center and just like radiate that. And what's amazing is that, of course, people who come into his field are gonna be uplifted by him, irrespective of what he does. And like, who knows what his life is gonna look like, but it only took such a short period of time for him to shift. You know? And this other little girl I worked on, she had, her mom is a client, and this little girl lives in New Zealand. She's, I think, 11 or 9, I can't remember. But anyway, I didn't know. And so the reason her mom made it a session with me was because she had been at a friend's house, and she ran running into a glass door. She thought the door was open, but it wasn't. So she like she broke the door with her head. And yeah, so it was very scary. She blacked out, lost consciousness, etc. And then and then she kept injuring herself. So she was in a bus accident, a school bus. And something happened, and she like smashed her head, the same side of the head, into like a window, and all that sort of thing. So it's the same side of the head over and over. And I was like, and her mother was, and her mother's like, this is a pattern. Yeah. So she created a session for me with this young woman who was starting to, again, disassociate from the body. Right? Came out of time, disassociated with the body, like repeating in pain, not feeling good at all, not wanting to socialize, like all this, because things don't feel good. It took one session, like pull her back into the body, take away all the distortion stuff, like all the patterning from her mother and trauma and blah, 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 all this stuff. And no, does she need to understand everything that's happening? No. But by the end, she came out and she's like, wow, she said to her mother, like, Mommy, I feel so much better, right? Because they change really fast, right? So the thing about, especially with kids right now on their devices, man, it is so hard. Let me just explain something to you as a parent. The flicker frequency of devices is meant to entrance and addict. That is the point of them. So when you look at them, you want to keep looking at them. As adults, we know this, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, can you binge watch for a long period of time? Sure.
Or even just go to a place where there's a TV, you didn't even know there was a TV, you don't even want to watch TV.
And you're like watching it. Yeah, it's scary. Yeah, we turn into like little zombies. Yeah. So in any case, it's the same for kids. And especially with kids, they don't, when they start to watch a device, from my perspective, they start to disassociate with their body even more. So they come right out of space and time, and they kind of merge into the world of the device, okay, which is a constructed world. Okay, it's not real. It's an alternate, like a kind of alternate reality, but not really. It's constructed. Some of those realities that some of these kids are exploring are predatory. Okay, and I'm saying this to parents because I want you to be aware. I'm not trying to scare you, and I'm trying to scare you a little bit, you know, because it's what's out there. Yeah. So I want you to be aware of what's there. Some of them are meant to hook your children in, okay, to keep them there, and energetically take from them. All right, so I'm not talking about, there's all these different things that are happening with cyberbullying and all this kind of creepy stuff online. So there's all those physical 3D world stuff, but also there's like this weird like siphoning from kids and stuff like that when they're watching. And
like even just a cartoon movie.
Yeah, or something. It pulls them into weird realities and dark stuff can happen. Okay. So I'm telling you this because I know it's hard to limit your children on their devices, right? Because they want to watch it. It's fun for them. And now a lot of times kids are socializing on it, right? So, for example, there's a they'll play games or whatever on Teams. Like that's how they interactive. Yeah, and so that's how they socialize together. Yeah. So that's fine because it's interactive. But when the kids start doing it by themselves and sort of like addictively, now we have kind of a problem. Yeah. And it's really important, especially because now they're being, we're shifting a little bit now. We're coming back into schools, but because they're online so much, it's really important to be mindful of how much time they're on that device and to limit it. Now, I know most parents are going to roll their eyes at me because they're like, do you know how hard it is for me to get them off the device? They don't want to. I have to fight them.
Yeah.
Yes, you will have to fight them, and you have the authority.
Yeah.
Okay, to like you're going to hold your space and your frequency resonance, and they're not going to watch it, because the thing is, you're going to have a lot more problems than just your kid fighting you, like being on that device, because it becomes this really addictive cycle. It can get really dark. They can be influenced in ways that's not good. They can be preyed on. It's not good.
I have a really good example of that. It's someone we know, their son, he's 13 now, but I guess at the time 12 or 11, I don't know, it was a couple years ago. He's one of the new consciousness kids, and he has very special abilities. And his mother was noticing he was on the video games a lot and was starting to not do his chores and like just kind of spiral down, like maybe talking back even, which he would never do. Like just kind of being way out of his body, a lot more clumsy than he usually is. All these negative things. And she was like, that's it, done. You're never, like, she kind of went really hard.
Oh, yeah.
You're never playing them again until you're, like, ever. That's it. Like, we're selling the thing, it's over.
Yeah.
Until you can make your own decisions when you're 18. You know?
Yeah.
And instead, he got into archery more and jujitsu, and now, like, wow, really great kid, thriving in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I saw it firsthand. I was like, whoa, who is this kid? When he was doing the video game thing, he was just a different person.
Yeah, it's really weird. It is an addiction.
Yeah.
Just like when someone's doing drugs, they turn into a different person. Yeah. It's the same.
Yeah.
It's just, that's what happens. So it's really important. And I know it takes a strong parent to be like, that's it. And
so you're saying you don't have to go that far. It could be maybe every Sunday morning as a family we watch one movie.
Yeah, whatever.
That's okay, you're saying,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. So just to limit it. Limit it.
Balance.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And so like a really good friend of ours, she's very aware of her kids. And she's like, okay, so playing with friends, all right, you have this much amount of time on the Xbox, that's your time. You are now done. Yeah. Get off.
Even if they, one more.
No. Now is off. Your time is done. Yeah. And they really hardline it with them.
Nice.
And so it's really important. And then when the kids are finished playing, she'll do something where she'll have an activity that's outside. She'll be like, okay, we're going for a walk now. Everyone, whole family, out.
Nice.
Right?
Nice.
So she's balancing it with something else.
Good.
And she's asserting her authority as the higher frequency. And so at first, it's funny, because they'll fight her a little bit with the walk. They're like, yeah. And she goes, okay, it's always like that. And then like by the time like we're in like 5 minutes, they're having a great time.
Oh, of course.
And as they got older, like a little bit like, but then they realize, okay, I actually do enjoy it. So I know it can be challenging. And it's like, the thing is, and I'm sure this is not gonna make me popular, you are not your child's friend. You are their parent. And so as a parent, you are responsible to guide them. You're not there to be popular. You're there to guide them. And so part of your job is for them to like push against you, to like find the boundary of who they are. And so if you never set a boundary, they just kind of flail, because it's like they don't have anything against which to press, right? They're just like kind of like, you know what I mean? It's kind of this weird power dynamic. Yeah. So by pushing against you, I'm sure as a parent it's very difficult, because you're like, okay, I feel like I'm not, my kid doesn't like me right now. That probably doesn't feel great. And at the same time, it's important, because then they learn, okay, wait, I have respect for this other person. They're setting a boundary for me. Okay, I may not like it, but I get it, at some point.
There is a respect that comes, isn't there?
And it's important, because when then you do things that are important, like take away the whatever device at this time, they're following you, right? Or if you say, okay, and it's not you're just taking it away out of oppression. You're like, the reason we're doing this is because of this. Yeah. Right? So you're explaining it. I'm not saying being like a harsh parent who's like mindless and not explaining things to your children. But again, it's not about, a lot of parents, I think when I watch people, want to be their kid's friend. I'm like, you can be like, that will happen like when they're 27 or 32. You know what I mean? Like when they're 8. Yeah. It's not about, because a lot of parents will like stretch and bend and like really kind of cave to their kids because they want to be liked. I'm like, you're not serving your kid.
And that's kind of their own distortion patterns, right? Of not stepping into your power, people pleasing. Yeah. So the parent really to work on themselves.
True. And then it takes more energy to lead.
Yeah.
Right? It's like people with pets. Dogs, when the dog is looking for an alpha. right?
Yes.
Because that's in a pack. That's what a healthy pack is. A healthy pack, there's an alpha, and the pack follows the alpha. That's just what the pack does. If there's no alpha, the dog goes a little bit crazy. It's kind of the same in a human pack. You know what I mean? We have different levels of frequency authority. Your children are learning from you. What are you teaching them? You know? And it's like if you don't have enough, you know, strength and self-respect for self, it's hard for them to learn that.
Right.
You know? Like, because they're looking at you. So anyway, what's happening now for kids is they're not grounded. They don't have a sense of time. They're feeling disassociated, not heard, like they want to check out. So a lot of, that's what I'm hearing. And so just for you parents to know, really important to get your kids into their bodies. So what does that mean? You have them do activities outside. You give them chores, right? Where they actually complete something. They do something and then they complete, right? Okay, so so they have a beginning and an end. So things that ground them, right? So like that they can do and they can see like a progression of like from this to this, I completed that. And then again, when they listen to the GFC at the end, it would help them come into time and into their bodies. You can play it for them in the background, even though they're like, what is this? You can just play it in the background.
Nice,
you know,
okay.
They'll start to get used to it and they'll start to like it. Some of them like it right away, actually. Some of them ask to listen to it more. They actually want to listen to more of it because it helps them feel grounded in their bodies, right? More empowered. And so that's the purpose of this. And I feel like it's needed right now because kids are really having a hard time because think about what's happening in the collective, right? We as adults are struggling with it. There's so much fear. There's so much chaos. There's so much blaming. There's so much like hate almost. Ugliness. Like this is what they're feeling, right? It's kind of gross.
Yeah.
So especially with the new consciousness kids who are coming from a higher resonating order and they're dropping into this, they're like, oh, gross, you know? So the more that you understand why what's happening is happening and you can get them centered and grounded, the better they will feel.
Great.
Okay, even if you aren't popular at the beginning. Yeah.
And again, like you were saying, they'll respect you more and then learn to, I'm sure, love you and be your best friend a little bit later.
Yeah, that comes later.
Do the work now.
Exactly.
So yeah, what a great, this GFC at the end, what a great tool versus the typical, you know, shoving down their throat, the medicine, you know, like I'm thinking of someone I know whose daughter she's only like 6. And she, as a 5-element person, I see her element. She's a water. So water, just in short, like people and kids, there's this juxtaposition between stillness and movement. So if waters are kind of moving on the outside, that's because they're still on the inside. If they're still on the outside,
they're agitated
they're
on the inside.
agitated. Yeah. So she's kind of fidgety. And they're like, oh, she has ADD. And I'm like, no, she's a water, no. And then now she's on meds. And it's like, oh, no.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's like the more you understand your child and just wait a minute, like do things like this, you know, and just listen to them more. I don't know.
Yeah. And like I said, like, you know, it's really hard for humans to be still. I know as adults we've learned to be sedentary. But kids, like, they have a lot of energy. They need to move.
Yeah.
You know, they need to like get out there and like run around and be maniacs. I mean, that's the whole point, right, of being a child. So I'm not saying not be mindful of your kids, but you know, they need to like burn it off in some way. And so I think it's really important to not underestimate the power of like a physical activity, and however you choose. And whatever the child wants to. Now, some parents are having trouble getting their kids to want to engage because they're so addicted to their devices, they don't want to move, and they don't want to go outside, they don't want to interact with anyone, they just want to be reclusive and watch the thing, you know, or play on the thing. So this is a hard road, right? So at some point, you have, as a parent, I imagine, that you're going to have to make a choice, which is probably not that comfortable, about how much do you want your child to be addicted to this thing? How much can you exert your influence so that they at least try something different, or put them in a situation where they can be exposed to something else and perhaps start to find something that they like, you know? So there's that line, you know, because some people are like, well, I don't want to oppress my kid. I'm not suggesting you oppress your child. And as a parent, you're meant to lead. So it's to bring them into situations and expose them to things that might interest them. So it's funny, you know, this friend of mine who has 2 young boys, I think they're like 15 and 12 now or something, or I'm probably getting their ages totally wrong.
Somewhere
Around there. She's still leading, and they all love each other, so they have a really lovely, close dynamic, and she's aware they're the teenage boys, they're going through their stuff, so she leads when she leads, and then she lets them have the space to like have their own authority as they get older.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the same when they were 10 as when they're now 15,
Sure.
obviously. But she's giving them space and respecting them, and also where she's like, okay, this is why we're doing this. But she always explains. You know what I mean? She doesn't just like throw down the law, so to speak.
Yeah.
She's explaining, okay, like, do you understand this is why this is happening? Do you understand the consequences of what you're doing?
It might take more time
and more energy.
But it's way better in the long run.
Totally.
So one more question. The GFC at the end, you were saying you can play in the background.
Yep.
Should the kid listen to it the first time not in the background, or does it not matter?
It doesn't matter.
It's kind of hard to get a kid
it's kind of hard to get them to sit. So I would say just play it in the background.
Okay.
Because they will adapt faster than adults anyway.
Yeah.
So just play it in the background.
And and maybe they don't have to sit there and listen to every word, but as long as the frequencies...
It's around. Yeah, exactly.
Around.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's around them. And you can, there are some who will play it when the kid's sleeping. Okay, just because they're available. There you go. They're there. They're laying there, so might as well. And actually, I've noticed that when kids listen to the GFCs at night, when they wake up, they feel a lot more grounded and calm and centered. So that is really helpful.
Yep.
So, and I know that you've noticed this with your own daughter.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, like, we're talking about 12, 15, whatever, but my daughter's one and a half almost. Mm-hmm. And I've been playing it for her since she was a baby. So.
Yeah, and she falls asleep and sleeps really well with it.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So any age kid.
It'll work for.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And then also, what I've noticed is that, like I said, some kids will request it. They'll want to listen more. And some kids are like, meh, not so much. But they don't resist it. They don't mind it, but they don't want it either. So it's not about forcing them. It's just a tool to help them sort of feel better about themselves. Yeah.
Thank you so much for offering this.
Yeah.
Very valuable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you who are new, we're just about to start the GFC. This is the most important part of this episode because it's where we actually do the frequency work and where change is catalyzed. So I invite you to settle in and get comfortable. You can sit, stand, or lie down. Or if you prefer to walk around slowly, you could even do that too. If during the GFC you find that you start falling asleep, even if you didn't feel tired when you started, just let yourself drift off. That just means that the frequencies are really high and it's more efficient for you to be asleep to integrate them. If this happens, it's good to listen to the GFC portion again a few times until you can stay awake for the whole thing. That's how you'll know you've integrated those higher resonating frequencies. Because I'm working on the frequency level, these GFCs are not like regular meditations. And many people find they go into varying degrees of altered state. If you happen to be listening to the audio version of this episode, please definitely do not drive while listening to this. Okay, here we go.